Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt, and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Stress Podcast. I am super excited to spend the next hour today with China Jones. Hi, China. How are you today?
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. You know, it's always wonderful to share the space with amazing, inspiring, motivational women, which I consider you to be one of those. And so
Thank you.
the first question that I always ask all of my podcast guests is actually 3 questions, and they're very short and easy. Number 1, where are you located? Number 2, what time is it? And number 3, what have you been up to today?
Okay. So what's interesting is that I actually heard of you through basically my sister-in-law, and she had said so much great stuff about you because she's based in Tahoe. And so that's where we met, is in Tahoe, very briefly. But I am currently based in Santa Barbara, California. And I have lived here primarily for the past 18 years. But just at the beginning of this year, or like in the spring, my husband and I have kind of actualized a dream of being able to split our time between Tahoe, Truckee, Tahoe, where you're from, and then Santa Barbara. So we spent about 4 or 5 months there and then came here. And now we're going to be going back up to Tahoe in February. So
Nice.
I know it's very different weather-wise for us right now. You're in your blanket and you're nice and cozy. And it's about 60 degrees here. So very different, no snow.
Mhm.
But I am looking forward to come back there. So that is where I am now, Santa Barbara. It is 4:14 and it is the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So what I've been up to today, doing a little packing because we're going to go visit some family up in Santa Cruz, my husband's family. And yeah, let's see, this morning I went for a run. I had breakfast with my son. He's 2.5. And so I like to make sure that we have some quality time each morning. And then I've had a few one-on-one calls with coaching clients. And yeah, then just prepping for this podcast.
Amazing. Cool. So tell us a little bit more about you. You already mentioned you're a coach as well, but where and when did your journey start? And you can pick, 5 years, 10 years, whatever you feel like is important to talk about to understand who you are today.
Okay, yeah. So I am a life leadership and business coach and a speaker and co-founder of the empowerment brand Women Who Warrior here in Santa Barbara. My background is really based in the whole fitness and wellness space. So I moved to Santa Barbara to go to UC Santa Barbara. It was one of those decisions where I haven't always been in tune with my intuition, but I remember when I visited the school, I told my dad, I said, this is where I'm going to college. And he's like, well, China, we should probably tour some other schools. And I said, no, Dad, this is it. I know in my heart that I'm going here no matter what. And we toured, toured a few other schools with him just to make him happy. But I knew I wanted to go to Santa Barbara because it's just such a beautiful place and the people are so nice. And so that's what landed me here. Initially out of college, I went into the fitness and health space just because it was 2008. It was the beginning of the recession and there weren't a lot of opportunities in Santa Barbara, but I knew I wanted to stay here. So I kind of just went with personal training, which I had been doing on the side in college. And that led me to really opening my own gym. And so I did that for 12 years. And the majority of that, I owned and managed a gym with a partner. So I got the chance to work with all different types of clients, from soccer moms and athletes to executives to celebrities. And it was really eye-opening to be able to facilitate change with so many people. And I loved it. And I think wellness and health are still core pillars of mine. But there became a point in my career where I knew I loved working with people, but my schedule was not my own. I was waking up at 4:30, 5 in the morning to go train clients and teach classes. And I knew I wanted to start a family. I knew it wasn't sustainable for me to have that type of schedule. And I was kind of stumped because I was like, these are some of my core values and I'm living them, but why am I not feeling aligned? Why am I not feeling satisfied? Like I have my own business. I don't know what's going on. So I spent 3 years really like trying all the things to try to figure out what did I actually want to do. And I knew that what I was doing wasn't it, but I had no idea what I wanted to do instead. And I'm very much like a 3 on the Enneagram. So I'm an achiever and I like to have a plan and I like to have a roadmap, and I didn't have any of that. And so my husband suggested, well, why don't you take a sabbatical? And I thought, what, people can do that? You just take 3 months off of work? Okay. So that was such a great suggestion, because I had just been in it. When you're running your own business, I'm sure, as you know, you're always thinking about work, and it's hard to give yourself that space to really reflect, or to let the universe kind of drop things in on you, because you're just always thinking and busy. So during that time, a friend came to me, my friend Randy, with this idea of the Women Who Warrior retreat. And that was 2019. And so it was, her vision was to really bring together all the women that we knew who were very inspiring to really teach their craft and show their expertise and create this community for a weekend. So I had never had any experience in anything like this before, event planning, but we ended up putting on an event for 70 women. It was a full weekend off grid. So we brought in bathrooms, power, catering, wine, lodging, like glamping tents, everything. And we did all the marketing, and all the speakers and all that stuff. So it was a lot, but it was so fulfilling for me. And I remember it was one of those moments where I realized like I didn't have to have everything planned out. It's okay sometimes to just like listen to your intuition. And if you have a vision of the direction you want to go, sometimes you just got to take the next step and trust that things will start to unfold. And that's kind of how we created the Women Who Warrior brand, which now we do different events, and we did some group coaching there for a while, but recently it's just more focused on events and bringing women together, whether that's online or in person in Santa Barbara. And we, so I love that. And then that helped me realize, just when we were doing the group coaching, that I wanted to know how to deeply like facilitate deeper transformational coaching, because I knew that I loved coaching, but I really wanted to have some time freedom and location freedom. And I wanted to help people who maybe knew what to do, but they just kept self-sabotaging or getting in their own way or getting stuck, or, not taking the actions they knew they needed to do. And so that led me down this path of kind of exploring all the people out there. And I found my current coach, Alyssa Nobriga, who she is a former psychotherapist. So I trained under her for a year and got Mastery Method certified. And I loved just learning some of these deeper tools. So the old way that I would coach was pretty much just strategy and behavior. Like, let's get clear. What do you want? Okay, let's make a strategy. What do you need to do for that? And then these are the behaviors. And then I'll give you some accountability around that. And yes, that can work well for some people, but oftentimes bigger stuff, if you're not seeing the progress that you want, or you feel like you're constantly pushing and it's hard, there's other reasons for that. And so the type of tools that I learned becoming Mastery Method certified, now I weave in things like somatic work. So how to really tune into the physical sensations in your body, like tightness in your chest, or even before this, sometimes I get like butterflies. And so just like tuning into that and sometimes working with that, and mindset work, which I think more people are familiar with, but just questioning some of those thoughts or beliefs that you have around maybe why you can't do something, insecurities, things like that. And then upgrading them with what's really true now. Emotional mastery, which I don't think is done as much in coaching, but it can be very powerful. And it's just really allowing your feelings to come up and out in a safe space and not like bottling them up. And then finally, unconscious repatterning, which is really becoming aware of old programming that you might have running in the background and updating it again with like where you are now in your life. So I know that was a lot, but really, as I would call myself a recovering high achiever, and I still love that, but I'm really passionate about helping other, high achievers and like ambitious. I work primarily with women create success without burnout. And so they can really maintain the energy to do the things that they love and enjoy quality time with the people that they care about.
Amazing. Yeah. And I've been writing down some questions, and then every time I like wrote them down, you actually explained a lot of it already, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I was really curious to learn a little bit more about the master method. So you talked a little bit about that, which is really interesting. I love that you were actually saying, strategy, behavior, and accountability is kind of what you get, from maybe the average coach, I would say maybe. And then, you're kind of diving deeper into these different modalities, which I really love. And I think it's so powerful to combine different modalities. And you actually did explain a little bit more the Woman Who Warrior events as well. I know that you have a weekend coming up with the Woman Who Warrior this coming weekend. And unfortunately, as you're listening to this podcast, this weekend it has already passed. But
it's a Wednesday night event. It's not a weekend, but it's literally like a week from today. So I'm sure the podcast will already be aired.
Yes, yes. Okay, that's good. So then how many people are you expecting for that event next week?
Yeah, so this is going to be a smaller event. Probably, so we're capped at 25. We're over halfway sold out. And it's what's interesting about this event. So there's a boutique here in Santa Barbara called Dylan Star. If you ever visit, it is my absolute favorite because the owner, Erica, she is a stylist. And so when you go in there, I've never liked shopping, but why I think her store took off and now she has 2 locations is because you come in and you say, hey, Erica, this is what I'm looking for. And she'll just pull things for you. So I'll say, you know what, I need like easy clothes that I don't need to iron. Something that can transition from day to night. Like I'll give her kind of a frame and she'll just pull the perfect things for me. And half the time things that I wouldn't normally think to try on, but then I'm like, wow, I really like this. So anyway, she's so talented. I love her stuff. And so her and I collaborated around putting together an event that's all about, it's called Walk the Walk, Embody Your Confidence. And so I feel like confidence really starts from within. So I'm going to be teaching on that piece, like how do you take control of your confidence and maybe some of these stories that are making you feel less confident. And then she's going to come in for the second portion and teach all about really styling to feel your best. So how to use the wardrobe that you already have, how to feel really confident in some of these pieces, maybe know what are pieces that you can take to fill out and round out your wardrobe. And a fun thing she's doing is she's inviting anyone to bring in any item from their closet that they don't know how to wear. Like I'm sure we all have a thing where we're like, we got this because we thought it was a good idea and we never wear it, right? So she's going to have everyone bring in one item and then she's going to show them, hey, this is how you can style it with other pieces.
So
So it's going to
cool.
be a lot of fun. It's going to be more intimate because we can only fit 25 people in the store for seating and everything, but I'm really excited about it.
That is really exciting. And it's such a powerful topic. I love it because, as I mentioned to you when I reached out to you, this has been something that has come up a lot in conversations with my clients where, because of the burnout they are experiencing or because of a toxic relationship or, relationship at work or, kind of toxic place that they're experiencing, their confidence decreased significantly and they're in a lot of self-doubt. And so I wanted to spend that time with you today in order to talk a little bit about that piece. And the first question that I have for you is, how did you deal with your own confidence? Do you feel like you've been overall a very confident person in your life, or what is kind of the pattern in your own life about this topic?
Great question. I'll be totally honest. My confidence it can go like a roller coaster, and it has in past times in my life. And it's funny because you reached out and I think our brains were on the same wavelength because I'm putting together this confidence workshop. Yesterday I posted like a reel that was all about confidence, literally the same day you reached out to me. I'm like, this is so weird, but I love it. So anyways, yeah, so I was thinking about that because there's been multiple times in my life where my confidence was really shaken. And I think a couple key times were, when I was personal training, when I first started, I actually met my husband that way. And he's very athletic and in great shape. And I had offered him a free training session and he took me up on it. And then he bought 10 sessions. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do with this guy? I was brand new. So I had just graduated college, like not, I think it was just that year before. And I just started personal training, I think like 2 months prior. So, if at like a global gym. So I remember thinking, okay, he's really advanced fitness wise. So I'm going to have to spend all this time researching, progressive overload and all these different more complex, like athletic training type of things. And then he would come in and he just wanted to spend time with me. Right. So he'd come in and say, I just biked like 50 miles yesterday. So can we not do any legs? And I would be like, but I spent hours putting together this very specific training protocol that everything built off the previous session. So yeah, there's been times with personal training also, when I've trained higher level executives or like celebrities, I just was like, oh my gosh, what are they going to think of me? What if they don't think I know what I'm doing? I think that comes up anytime that you are really faced with an opportunity of growth, right? Where you feel like you're a little bit out of your comfort zone. I definitely faced that when I transitioned out of my career and I'm like, what am I doing again? Not having that clear, direct path. Also just having my son and then getting back into work and even being a mother, being like, I don't know how to do this. Like, am I doing it right? There's always those thoughts. So I would say that until I did do a lot of this work myself, some of this inner work, which was very foreign to me because I grew up in a male household with my dad and my brother, who I don't know if you know my brother, but he is very a personality, architect. Both my dad and my brother are like math people and not really emotional. And so it was all that's where I got that, like, okay, strategy and logic and all that stuff. And so learning to really accept my own emotions and listen to them and do some of this work on my own has given me such a broader range to be able to identify, okay, I'm feeling insecure because I don't feel like I'm experienced enough. And I think big stories that come up that I hear a lot with clients, and I've felt this way myself, is I'm not doing it right. I'm not worth it. I'm not enough. Maybe I'm not smart enough or experienced enough or, any of these things. And so being able to identify what those are is the first part of actually changing those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was writing down all of these different things because I wanted to make sure to summarize it. So the question what that you just kind of answered was
Mhm.
where does insecurities and self-doubt actually come from, right? And I think it is comparison. It
Yeah.
is starting new things and feeling that imposter syndrome, which I
Yes.
hear all the time. You know, I think women are still a little bit like, and even men, like I work with both. I work with men and
Mhm.
women, and they're like, I kind of feel like imposter, and I'm like, don't feel bad about this. Like everyone does experience that at some point in their lives, especially when you're transitioning, for example, from one role to another or from one responsibility to another, because it's a new thing. And so it's very natural that you're just questioning yourself and you're in a new field where you're learning new things and you're not the expert anymore, but where you're like, going back to the student. So imposter syndrome is a big one. And then one thing that I really loved that you were saying, which was maybe not as apparent to me, but now totally makes sense, is the type of people that you actually work with, right? So you were
Mm.
saying like your husband was, or like now your husband, but at the
Yeah.
time your client, was like such a high level that it pushed you to be on such a high level, and that
Right.
kind of brought back these like feelings of imposter syndrome. But I'm thinking about the tech clients that I work with, right? And they work in these like high pressure environments. You go to Google, you go to Meta, you go to Microsoft or Amazon. There's all these smart, amazing people. I remember when I started at Google, I had lived in 4 or 5 different countries. I spoke 3 languages fluently. I had like good degrees from great, European schools. And I remember I started at Google and I met all these people, and they all spoke like 6 languages fluently and had lived in, they had like 3 different passports because they lived in all of these different countries and were from all of these multinational families and worked and had the most amazing internships and graduated from the most amazing schools. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like you very quickly don't feel special anymore in a way, because again you compare yourself to these to these other people. So
Yeah, and you
um
bring up a good point too with just the people that you're surrounding yourself with,
mhm,
because it sounds like for you, maybe where you were before, you might have been kind of the big fish in the little pond where
mhm,
you're
mhm,
thinking, oh, wow, I have all these qualifications. And then
mhm.
suddenly you get put in a different
To
pond
this
and
bigger
suddenly
pond.
you're
Yeah.
the little fish and you're
Yeah, yeah,
looking
yeah.
around and saying, do I really have what it takes
Mhm.
to do this? So yeah, that's
Yeah.
huge when comes up a lot when that happens.
Yeah, so interesting. Cool. So yeah, so you were saying the first step to kind of eliminating that self-doubt and increasing your confidence again is to just have that awareness, right? And to identify where does it currently come from, right? And so
Hmm.
for you listener that is listening right now, you might be thinking, oh yeah, I just started this new job, or I just started this new role, or I am going through a personal challenge, right? I'm gonna address it too, like, a lot of listeners know because I feel like I talk about it all the time still.
Yeah.
But I went through a big breakup 2 years ago. My fiance and I broke up, and it was a huge transformation for me, and obviously a huge hit on my confidence, and like lots of self-doubt came up. And so it can be obviously professional things that can bring up these feelings, but it can also be those personal experiences and traumas that make us question ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another thing to remember is that confident people, or the people that you view as confident, they experience the same things that everyone else does. So they experience the doubt and the insecurities and the fear and the failure and all of that stuff. It's just oftentimes they have learned tools to work through them,
Mhm.
and they also know that it's common, especially if you're living, like I think you and I are both very like growth minded and
Mhm.
always pushing ourselves a little bit and meeting that edge. And whenever you do that, that's when it's going to come up. So you
Mhm.
might feel
Exactly.
stable if once you get comfortable with where you are, and then suddenly someone might ask you to be on a TV show, and that's a whole new edge. So then you go through all of those stories again. So knowing that those stories often come up again and again anytime you are faced with that. And I think the secret is not avoiding the very things that we don't want to face, right? The resistance or the things that we're scared of is really instead, and what we feel like might be holding us back, it's the paradox of transformation. So that's actually what we need to explore and get curious around in order to overcome those things, to build the courage to have that confidence.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I love the reminder that confidence comes and goes in waves. It's very rare that that the confidence is always on a 10 out of 10 kind of a level. And, a lot of the conversations I've had with clients recently is that, they are, for example, choosing to take on this like new super challenging role. And then they experience like the feelings of self-doubt and the feelings of insecurity and the fear of failure and the confidence hit, right? And then, we had these powerful conversations where they were reminded that they actually made that choice. They chose to take on that position because they actually love these challenges and they know that they're growing on that. And, when you're listening right now, maybe this is the first big aha moment where you're like, oh yeah, I do that too. And it's good. Like that's who I am. And I know, a lot of high achievers and high performers are listening to this podcast, and especially those people, I think, experience these feelings the most. I actually have a workshop on imposter syndrome, and it actually says that more high performers experience imposter syndrome, and the people that don't have those high expectations of themselves don't actually have them as much.
Which is so funny because those are the people that others maybe look up to and be like, wow, they have it all together.
Right.
And secretly, nobody knows that inside they're just in turmoil and they're thinking, oh my gosh, someone's going to find out I'm a fraud. I don't know what I'm doing. When really, it's like nobody really knows everything that they're doing. It's all just kind of an experiment.
So you did mention a couple of tools and techniques and steps that you're taking and that you're helping people to take in order to overcome these fears and thoughts. So pick us up there a little bit and tell us what you do.
Yeah. So let's see. There's a few different routes, depending on the person, but I'll share like one story and really why I think it's important to get to the root cause rather than, for example, the old way I used to coach, which was, okay, you're not doing this action we talked about. Let's just add more strategy. That doesn't work, right? So if someone isn't doing what they are wanting to do, you have to kind of peel back the layers and figure out why that is. So I have a current client who has a desire. She's working in a career she doesn't enjoy, and she knows she wants to transition into a new career, and she wants it to be in the wellness space, but she feels like because she doesn't have her wellness practice, like her regular workouts and really healthy eating and all of that dialed perfectly, that she's not qualified to be in that space, even though she studied in school, like kinesiology and all of these nutrition and all of these other components. And she's very knowledgeable, and she reads a ton of books and listens to all the podcasts, and she knows all of it, but there's some part of her that thinks she really has to walk the walk and be perfect in order to do that. So there's been this delay in her actually making that transition into a new career. And when we kind of started to peel back some of the layers, first we just started, sometimes strategy is a great place to start. So it's like, okay, what do you want your life to look like? Why don't we make a plan for that? And then she was noticing that she kind of self-sabotaged and she wasn't seeing the progress that she wanted. And so and oftentimes I don't jump into like the deeper work right away because I want people to trust me. And so, a few sessions in, we started to explore like why that would be and why she couldn't get past a certain set point. Something would always come up. And so what we found was that when she was younger, she had a person in her life, in her family, who was, for lack of better words, would just get really, really jealous and had really negative experiences. So whenever my client would do well or get attention, this other family member would just verbally and even abusively kind of beat her down because she was in the spotlight. And so she learned at this younger age that if I do well, bad things will happen. And she didn't even make that connection, but suddenly she realized, oh, this is why I believe these stories. Like, I have to stay quiet. It's better to stay quiet. Or if I really speak my truth and if I'm authentic, people aren't going to like me. And so doing that, like, first, it's like, how do we get awareness around what's actually true? What are these stories that might be deep rooted? Why you're not actually making the progress you want? And then starting to reprogram what's actually true now. And while it might not happen overnight because some of these stories are unconscious, it's like starting to chip away at them through these different avenues, like going in somatically or then going in with mindset. So for example, with mindset, and that's a really simple thing I think people can do on their own. So if you're listening to this now, and let's say that there's a story that you have on repeat for you, there's a story that maybe holds you back from where you want to be. So paying attention to what's a story that would have the biggest impact in your life if you no longer believed it, and really getting clear on that. So if we're thinking about confidence, it might be, what is something that I lack confidence around? Or what's my goal and what is getting in the way of that? What am I worried might happen, if I took that leap, and I'm afraid that, well, people are going to judge me as X, or I don't know enough and I'm going to look stupid. Like, getting clear on what that actual thought is, exactly how it's coming out of your head, so you can either freeform write or speak it. One of my clients is very much like a verbal processor. So for her, coaching works well because she'll just kind of, we call it like word vomit. She's like, let me just process this. And then through processing it, a lot of times she gets a lot of clarity. But then on her own, if she's kind of stuck in between our sessions, I'll usually just have her voice note what's coming up for her. And then she'll go back and be able to pick out, okay, these are my main fears or concerns that I need to address. And then once you get that clarity and the specificity, that's what gives you the power to start looking at it and analyzing and saying, like with mindset, okay, is this true? Can I know without a shadow of a doubt that this belief is true outside of my mind? Because of course you're going to make up this evidence in your mind, but if you didn't have those stories in your mind, can you know without a shadow of a doubt that it's true? And if not, and spoiler alert here, you can never truly know, right? Aside from the stories you tell yourself. So then it's like, how do we get curious around what would it look like if we flipped it to the opposite? And then use that to start looking for evidence around what are the ways that the opposite could actually be true. So if it's, wow, I'm really not experienced enough to have this position or to take on this project at work, or I don't know enough, then the opposite would be, actually, I either am experienced enough or I do know enough. And you can find evidence in your life of times where, let's say you didn't know something, but you figured it out. So you're just finding, okay, well, I guess in college, I didn't know this, or for me, the retreat, I didn't know how to put on a retreat and host and market and do all those things, but we figured it out and it was successful. So finding that evidence, even if it's not in the related field, helps you realize that you're not as bad as you think you are. So finding some of that stuff. I think that's one way. And then another tool.
Can I interrupt you for a second? And you remember that other tool that you want to share with us? Because I feel like there are so many really cool nuggets in there.
Yeah.
That I just want to just kind of summarize that again, just
Mhm.
to make it super, super clear. So the first one that I want to highlight again is one of the things that you talked about is kind of the question around how to identify your old stories. And there's different ways. And you addressed like, kind of the conversation and that verbal processing or journaling. I love what you said. I was like nodding like crazy as you were like talking about it, like the reverse to-do list of finding evidence that you're actually capable, right? I actually
Mhm.
did exactly that thing with a client recently, the one and that I just said as well, that was kind of struggling with a lot of self-confidence and self-doubt, and then realized she made that choice herself to actually put herself in that position, and she does it over and over and over again because she's a high achiever and she wants to advance in her career, and in order to advance you have to get uncomfortable. And I feel like that's such a powerful just mind shift to be like, oh, I made that decision.
Right. It's like,
Like
what are my
nobody's
choices and what
pushing
am
me
I
in that.
choosing?
And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, so verbal processing, super, super important, and you can be with a coach, can be with a therapist, can be with a friend. I just had that
Mhm.
experience myself yesterday, talked to my therapist about a situation with a friend. And I wasn't really clear on it. So it's so interesting to go through these processes. And even as us, right, as coaches, and you said as well that you have your own helpers to
Yeah.
I talked with my therapist about like that situation for 30 minutes, and I was just talking for 30 minutes. She just let me talk. And I just found my own answers literally in
Right.
those 30 minutes, because all of a sudden I was like, oh, right, that's why, maybe I feel insecure, or this was maybe that
Yeah.
childhood trauma that was triggered with that new friend, for example. So yeah, identifying old stories is super, super important. And we gave you a couple of different ways to do that. And the other thing, China, that I wanted to talk about really briefly is self-sabotage, because you kind of mentioned that. And this is something I feel like I've heard a lot about in podcasts as I was kind of going through my first kind of initial personal transformation and personal development process, but I never really knew what it meant or how that can look like. Can you give us a couple of examples on that?
Yeah, good question. So, um, I guess how I would describe it is self-sabotage is not necessarily conscious.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually an unconscious thing that you might be doing. So, let's say that you decide that you want to lose 20 pounds, and that's your goal, and you write it down and you do all the things and you have a plan. But as you start getting closer, you suddenly binge on chocolate cake, or you kind of fall off track with your workouts, or the things always come up that are not letting you get to where you want to be.
Mhm.
And so self-sabotage is often the unconscious mind running in the background because there's there's like a fear. So one great question you can ask, and even just like getting silent, and I'm big on closing your eyes, so it helps us get out of like the logical brain. So closing the eyes and just asking yourself, okay, what is my goal? What specifically do I want? And then what do I fear would happen if I got this goal?
Mhm.
And really just getting curious around anything that might be coming up. Because initially you think, well, no, I really want this goal. This is what I'm driven for, right? So maybe your client, well, I want to get this new position because I want to have a better title or make more money. And then but secretly she might be afraid that she's not qualified.
Mhm.
So that thought, she might not even be aware of it, but that's why she missed, and she was late for the interview, or these little things that you might be doing and not even realizing it. So
Yeah.
I find that self-sabotage is often coming from that unconscious part that we don't even realize is running in the background.
Yeah. And sometimes I think it expresses itself in like these excuses that we make, or, it's
Yeah.
obviously this work with clients is so interesting because you would talk, there are some clients you talk to every week or every 2 weeks, you check in on kind of write the action items that you discussed. And then they're like, oh, I got sick again. or my daughter did this, or, like it's all that external environment, or like even ourselves, that it's just like these little things, but it's always a good excuse to not
Yeah.
actually start, right? And that's, if you, maybe you're listening right now and you think, oh yeah, I know what they're talking about, right? Because we do that, right? And it's really powerful to catch yourself in these moments and to be like, oh yeah, I do constantly get sick, or I use it as an excuse, because there are so many different ways of how you can how you can lose 20 pounds, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to just find the right way on how to do it. And then the other thing, especially, as you were talking about kind of that unconscious mind and how that's kind of holding us back, I do want to say one or two words about that too, because that's basically our habit and our nervous system that's keeping us safe. So,
Yeah.
think about, you are, now that we had this example, you want to lose 20 pounds, but you are used to obviously a certain way. You have built habits and patterns and routines that keep you in this place of maybe 20 pounds too heavy. And so when you are starting to make that decision that you want to change and that you want to go to the gym, it's actually a new process, right? It's not an automatic behavior anymore, because your automatic behavior is to stay in that 20 pounds too heavy,
Yeah.
20 pound space. So you are actually having to signal to your nervous system that the new thing that you're doing is actually also safe. It's really interesting when you're kind of starting to look at that neuroscience of why we do certain things the way we do, right? Why have we created all of these automatisms? Well, because it's helping us save time, and it's helping us make faster decisions, but they may not always be good for us. But even if they're not good for us, our nervous system and our brains actually don't know the difference between what is good for us and what is bad for us. They only know what we've been repeatedly doing over and over and over again. So if you're used to coming home and eating a box of chocolate, that's your normal. And so it's going to be kind of hard to break that. And that your unconscious mind will self-sabotage you to keep you from taking that new step, because that's kind of almost in the danger zone at the beginning. So just wanted to say
Right.
that. That's
Yeah.
kind
And
of
it's like
where
what's
it comes from.
unknown, your ego thinks is unsafe because you
Exactly.
don't know, even though what's known might be worse for you and might not be helping you at all. But
Mm,
yet your ego is like, okay, well, I'm going to just stick with what I know because that feels safe.
yeah. Tool number 2.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think, and there's like some more specifics I could get into, but for me, it's also just getting curious and like shifting the perspective around, um, like what might the lesson be
Mm-hmm.
in this insecurity? What could it be trying to teach me?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if we have an example of someone who, can you think of a client example, like an insecurity they might have?
Um, I think a lot of my clients have the fear of failure or not being good enough.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
So
not being good enough may be a good one, of like I'm doing this new role and I have like 5 different things that I need to take care of at the same time, and I'm super afraid that I'm gonna fail, and I'm super
yeah.
afraid I'm not good enough to actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I gave a corporate talk last week, and there was a guy who is in tech who he's in data. So he reports on data. So
Mm.
what he mentioned at the end of my talk, and I stopped the recording, I said, hey, I'm going to stay on and answer any questions. And he said, I often feel insecure about giving these talks and like presenting the data that I have because I'm so afraid that people are going to ask me something that I don't know.
Interesting.
And that happens a lot. We think, oh gosh,
Yeah.
what if someone asks me something I don't know? And so I think getting really clear around what is the insecurity of me being insecure about doing this, trying to teach me. So maybe it wants to make sure that deeper desires, it wants to make sure that I'm going to be fully prepared so I don't make a fool of myself.
Mm.
And so once we know that, then we can look into, okay, well, what would it look like if I was fully prepared? And for him, he said, well, there's just so much data and there's so many, and it changes all the time that it's like, I feel like I can never fully be prepared.
Hmm.
But I asked him, well, what have you done in the past that's worked? Or,
Hmm.
how can we kind of narrow this down a little bit? And so for him, that was um, presenting some of his like rough data to colleagues before making the full presentation to his company. So doing
Hmm.
like a little mock presentation and getting feedback from colleagues around, is there anything that you feel like I missed? Or even getting clear around what are in his mind, or asking his colleagues what are the key things that are going to be most relevant to the company, so he can get other people's opinions and make sure he's really clear on those things. And also practicing, if he doesn't know, how can you answer that question when you don't know? And
Hmm.
maybe that looks
Yeah,
like saying, well, I'm happy to figure that out and get back to you,
exactly. This is an
right?
excellent question. Thank you so much for asking this question. I'll get back to you on
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Yeah, and just saying, being clear, like there's a lot of data, and so this is more of a high level, and and the things that I know, I'll let you know, but I'll have to just revisit the data, and I can get you something by tomorrow and answer that question. So that in itself is more confident, because I think there's this belief that like people need to know everything these days.
For
But
sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, I always joke around like, what about there's the University of Google, right? Or like the UC YouTube, right? So you
Mhm.
can look up so many things these days. So you don't need to have all the information in your head. You just need to be resourceful enough to
Exactly.
say, hey, I'll figure it out and get back to you, and whatever it is.
Mhm. And have the confidence to say it, right?
Yeah,
So that's kind of so funny because it kind of goes in that circle of you feel that insecurity, but if you totally show up as a confident person, nobody will doubt you, you know? And I
right.
think that's a practice too of just like, yeah, like when
That
you were
like
saying that, I was like,
embodying
you
it.
can't know everything. Nobody knows everything. Like that's such a that's not the right expectation to have of yourself, right? Because if you would know everything, it would be really boring.
Yeah, right, right. And I think another piece is really tying into, maybe there's something specific that you're afraid to do. Like for this guy, it was, well, I feel really nervous every time I do this presentation, but helping him tie into, how does you presenting this information that you are very qualified to do, how does this help your team? How does this help your company? How does this help a bigger vision? So you're less focused on how am I going to be seen versus how can I serve?
Mhm.
So just getting that
Yeah,
perspective
I
shift.
love
So it's
that.
less about you and more about the bigger picture.
Mhm. Yeah, amazing. So many good nuggets in here, and hopefully, some really good pointers that we started just kind of the chain of thought for everyone that's listening to just think about confidence in a different way and be really validated as well that we all go through these moments of like, confidence. One of the things that we haven't talked about is self-love, and that's something that I had to practice and learn over the last 2 years, right? Because sometimes these insecurities and self-doubt comes up because of an experience, and I think really practicing self-love has helped me a lot personally, for example, as well, to just build that confidence back up and build new experiences that support who I am and that support the image of myself. Self-care, right? We could talk about all of these different things, but we're gonna stop here, because I want you to kind of maybe go and reflect now a little bit on these different tools that China shared with us today. China, if people are interested to connect with you and learn more about what you do, how can they best connect with you?
Yes, I love connecting with people. So there's a few ways. If you are wanting to connect with me on social, I would say Instagram is my area. I am not super consistent with it, but I feel like that's really I'm not a big on Facebook or anything. So my Instagram is Coach China Jones, all one word, and I often share just different tips around some of these things that we talked about with confidence, or sharing different tools or stories or things like that. I also offer workshops, corporate talks, and I do them workshops both online, so for a broader audience, or more specifically, like in Santa Barbara, like the one we have coming up next week. Often those are with my business partner, Randy from Woman Who Warrior. But then I'll also be in Tahoe. So maybe we can collab and do something fun
I
when
would
I'm
love
back
that.
there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you're interested in any of those or setting something up, you can either DM me on Coach China Jones or on Instagram, or you can email me china@chinajones.com. And my name is just CHINA, just like the country. And I do have limited spaces for coaching as well, for one-on-one coaching. So if you are wanting to shortcut or streamline the process, you're kind of having trouble making progress on your own, then feel free to just reach out to me and we can explore what that looks like and see if it's a good fit.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think this is such an important topic, and so important, I also feel like, to just talk about it and to break a little bit that stigma that we have and maybe we don't dare to talk about. So I do actually love that event that's coming up for you. I wish I would be there. But I'm excited to see you back here in Tahoe. And yeah, thank you so much for being here today. I wish you all the best for your event next week. Happy Thanksgiving, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. All right. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.